Hi you guys, how are you all? I hope that you are doing well. It's time for part 2 of last week's video, which is the second half of our cross-country road trip that we did a few weeks ago. It was really fun hearing your response to part 1. I got so many nice DMs and comments on that video, so thank you guys so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and hopefully part 2 will be just as interesting. I feel like part 2 really went by in like a blur because we were getting really anxious to get to New York, but I left you guys off in Albuquerque, which, like I said, really wonderful time. We had so much fun there and definitely want to go back and keep my mug out of the frame. Our next stop that we had planned to make was Oklahoma City, and that was just because it was like a nice kind of stopping point. Again, not a super long day to get there. So after staying overnight in Albuquerque, we did our same old routine of getting up really early. I know I mentioned in last week's video, but we stayed at a Comfort Inn and they had like a breakfast area, which ended up being super nice. So we toasted some of the gluten-free bagels that I had brought, which ended up being like our breakfast almost every day of the journey, except for 1 day or 2 days. 2 days. Being someone with dietary restrictions, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but I find breakfast to be the hardest meal to find if you need to get something quick and on the go. Like lunch, you know, there are salads, there are bowls often at different places, but breakfast is really hard because I feel like the only thing that really works for me are like eggs or a gluten-free product, and to find a place where you can get a gluten-free product easily is challenging. So it was really helpful to have the bagels with us, and they're also delicious. I've talked about them before. They're odd bagels, some of the best gluten-free bagels I've ever had, so definitely try them if you are gluten-free as well. But we continued on our journey and eventually left New Mexico and crossed over into Texas. And originally we were gonna go like further south. Again, I talked about this in last week's video. So we were gonna stop in Austin, but because we were kind of cutting across to Oklahoma City, we just like hit kind of like the top part of Texas. So it was probably the shortest distance we could have gone through Texas. But regardless, it still felt very large. So much flat land, which was kind of interesting to see. It just made the scale of everything feel really weird, especially because we would pass through just like acres and acres and acres of wind turbines, which they're absolutely massive structures, but they feel tiny in the landscape, which was kind of interesting. I mean, obviously as we got like closer to them, they were huge, and so interesting thinking about the infrastructure that goes into actually putting them up and figuring out like spacing of them. We saw a couple that had blades that needed to be replaced, so we saw these huge blades on the ground next to them, and it was just remarkable how massive they were. And as I said, there's just acres of them, so it was kind of cool to see all of this open flat land being put to an alternative energy use. I know there's obviously environmental impacts of wind turbines, but I have never seen so many of them. So that was really fascinating. I also was kind of taken aback by how dry it was in the winter time. I mean, we're in drought in California, and so definitely like as the weather starts getting warmer, you see it drying out. And my gosh, by the end of last summer and even into early fall, it felt so dry in California, but we had big rains that came in and kind of made things green again. We're not out of the drought by any means, but there was a lot of green around the area that we live in California. Dryness in Texas was crazy. There were tumbleweeds coming across the highway, and like the landscape was just so dry, and it made me wonder like what's it like in summertime, because I know it gets so hot in Texas. And I don't know if wildfires are a thing in Texas or not. I'll have to kind of like look into it. I also noticed when we were driving that there are a lot of kind of like abandoned or like dilapidated buildings, which is not something that I'm really used to seeing in California. And I'm wondering if because it's like there's so much more land in Texas that maybe it's easier or more affordable to just like leave a building and start over somewhere new instead of actually deconstructing it. Maybe there's like no need for that. Before we knew it, we got into Oklahoma, and we actually stopped at the like official rest stop of Oklahoma, which I wish we had done that more in the beginning of the trip, because we like started taking pictures at them so that we could actually have something if we want to like put together a photo album for ourselves that shows like this is the state that we were in. And the Oklahoma rest stop was really nice. I mean, it's definitely a recommendation to stop at. Like those rest stops and just rest stops in general tend to be really well maintained, at least that's what we found. So those made for great places to stop and stretch our legs, and there's like a fenced in area where we could let moose run, which was really nice. We just kept trekking along from there until we got to our Airbnb, which was in Oklahoma City. We got there relatively late in the day. We got to the Airbnb, which was really cute. It had this like adorable yellow door. It's a really nice house, and it was close or driving distance from like a nice little downtown area. So we looked up different restaurants in the area, and we found, I think it's like a Mexican fusion restaurant called OSO, and it was really good. We got takeout from there. The atmosphere was super cute in the downtown area. It was pretty quiet. There wasn't like a lot going on. All of the shops had really closed, but it was just nice restaurants, and it was maybe like a 3-block radius that we walked around a little bit and then went back to the Airbnb and ate our food and watched something on Hulu or something like that, because we knew we had a big day the next day, which was the trip from Oklahoma to Nashville. And we'd kind of been watching the weather, and we knew we were going to run into this storm that was blowing through that was predicted to be pretty large and have a lot of rain. And we didn't want to be on the road for most of the rain, just like not super safe driving conditions, and it makes the drive like a little bit more tense and not as enjoyable. So originally we were planning to go from Oklahoma City to Little Rock, then to Nashville, but instead we decided to drive through Little Rock to get to Nashville and then stay an extra day in Nashville to wait out the storm. And it was going to be about like a 10-hour day, which is a lot, especially if you've already been driving like halfway across the country. But we knew that it would be okay, one, because of how our drive had been going so far, and two, because we had taken a road trip up to Oregon earlier in the year, and long story short, there's some wildfire issues and we had to reroute, and our day ended up being like 12 hours, and we knew we were okay then. So a 10-hour day was going to be okay for us. It was just going to be a big push. So what we did was we looked for like a good halfway point, and that did end up being Little Rock. So our plan was to drive from Oklahoma City to Little Rock, pause, and then go to a dog park there, which we had looked up, get lunch, kind of like regroup, and then keep going on to Nashville, because Little Rock was like the perfect halfway point for us. Since this was a very spur of the moment, last minute plan to decide to stay an extra day in Nashville, we booked an Airbnb without really thinking about it. We just like saw something that was cheap. At that point, we had spent a lot of money on gas and food and everything, so we were looking for like less expensive places to stay. We booked something that was cheap without a lot of thought, and just like got on the road and got moving really early in the morning. I will say, on our drive from Oklahoma to Little Rock, that halfway point, we saw the most beautiful cloud formations and skies that I have ever seen. Just like huge billowing clouds that just are absolutely gorgeous. Blue sky behind it. When we first woke up, it was a really pretty sunrise. So we pushed to get to Arkansas, and we got there around lunchtime. We did hit a little bit of weather, and it was kind of drizzling by the time we got to Little Rock, and we quickly found out that our windshield wipers really needed to be replaced. They were not in great condition, so hot tip, always check that before you leave on a road trip. We knew we had to replace the windshield wipers, but we went to the dog park. We had a great time. It was kind of rainy, so he got a little bit dirty, which meant that we had to do like a makeshift brushing and cleaning session before we put him back in the car, which added some more time to our drive. And then we ran over to an AutoZone to pick up new windshield wipers, and I feel like it was the most classic road trip experience, where we get there, I say to Jared, like, are you sure you know which windshield wipers to buy? He's like, yes, I do. He goes in, he buys some, he comes out, he's like playing with the windshield wiper, of course doesn't read any of the instructions, trying to figure it out himself. It's taking a little while, so I kind of get out of the car and I'm like, hey, did you read the instructions? He's like, yes, these are actually not for our car. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna buy different ones. I'm like, okay. Meanwhile, I see someone who's been working at AutoZone come out and help a different car put on their windshield wipers. And so I'm thinking at this point, like, okay, we should probably just be asking for help here. But I tried not to say anything. Jared comes out with another set of windshield wipers, is playing around, doesn't read the instructions. I'm like, okay, why don't we slow down and look at the instructions, or try and YouTube this or something? And he's like, no, I got it. Like 20 minutes later, I'm like, okay, I saw this very nice man come out and help this other woman. Let's go in and ask to see if they can come out and help. He's like, well, I'm not going in to ask. If you want help, you go in and ask. And so I was like, okay. So I walk in there, I ask the very nice man. He's so sweet and so helpful. He wants to know, like all about our road trip and where we're going. He comes right out, literally pops off our other windshield wipers, pops the other one on. Maybe took him like 2 minutes to do the whole thing. And Jared and I were just cracking up on the car as we were leaving the AutoZone, because it just felt like such a classic argument. All that to say, we were also hungry at that point, so definitely was time for lunch. After like a relationship test of replacing the windshield wipers, add hunger on top of that, add a long drive ahead of us, we definitely needed some food. So we stopped at a Chipotle, which is actually great if you are gluten-free. It's like the one fast food place that I feel like always has something that I can have. So we stopped there, we grabbed lunch, we like regrouped and ate, and then got on the road a little bit later than we had originally intended to, but we still had about like 6 hours ahead of us, or 5 or 6 hours, so we knew we just kind of needed to book it. This was definitely one of the days that we caved and went to Starbucks like later in the day and both got a coffee just to kind of, I don't know, have something nice and warm and just to like perk ourselves back up. Starbucks is actually like relatively expensive when you think about it, so you can save yourself a lot of money if you're either like making tea at home or coffee, or in our case we had these like little pre-mixed oat milk lattes that we had in our cooler that we would have every morning. But we definitely caved, and we also got Moose a puppuccino, which is like a cup of whipped cream, and he's so funny when he's eating it. He's also like so excited when we get to a Starbucks. Like he just knows. We've only done it I think once with him before, and after that he knows. As soon as we pull up to a window, he just like tries to stick his nose through the front window from the back seat, like tries to get at whoever is handing the puppuccino and just goes crazy. So it was both like very good comic relief to give him that, and then also incredibly annoying because he was just like searching for another puppuccino and would see us drinking our coffees and think that it was a puppuccino and like try and bite it out of our hand, which was so frustrating. Both of us were like getting so agitated, so I think we're gonna hold off on puppuccinos for a while. He goes a bit crazy. We definitely hit weather as we were getting into Nashville. Like we started to see lightning and it was raining, and we were really eager to just like get to the Airbnb. So we were staying right outside of downtown and more like a neighborhoody part, and we pull up to the Airbnb and we like open the door, and it is massive. It is the biggest Airbnb I have ever stayed at. Just so many different bedrooms. It's 2 floors. It's an entire house. And it was like $100 and something a night, I think, because we had booked that morning. So we were like in heaven because we knew that we were going to be there the whole day tomorrow, and we were going to be inside since it was supposed to just be miserable out. So we had so much space to just like spread out and relax in. We quickly unloaded the car, trying not to get too wet since it was raining. And then we ordered takeout from a place called Pharmacy, and we got burgers. It was very good. We just like watched a movie, relaxed, and took like a deep breath knowing that we had made it this like very long day, and that the next day would just be super restful. So the next day we woke up, and like I said, this was the day that the big storm was supposed to roll in, but we woke up. Jared was able to do like an indoor bike ride because he has a trainer, so he was super happy. We had a zillion rooms to go in, so we just had some like space to breathe, and Moose had a lot of space to, you know, like play around in and run around. Really funny, he like found a bedroom on the 2nd story that he would just go into, and we would be like, where's Moose? Like, where did he go? And he had just like walked himself up the stairs, nudged open the door with his nose, and he would just be laying in the middle of the floor up there. So he had claimed that as his room. But yeah, we were really enjoying the place, and we thought, oh, let's go out and, you know, like treat ourselves to a cup of coffee or go to a cafe or something, and maybe just drive through downtown since it's kind of drizzling but it's not raining too hard. So all of us get loaded into the car, we drive out. Maybe like 2 minutes into our drive, all of a sudden it is like a tsunami of rain just like dumps from the sky. We immediately lost like all visibility. The roads just completely flooded. Cars were getting like waves of water washed over them. People were crawling at like 2 miles an hour, and we were like, okay, we need to turn around and go back home. We're gonna get inside. Like, this is not weather to be out on the road in. I mean, I guess in retrospect, it's probably like a little bit of what like a flash flood is like, maybe, because it only lasted for like 15-20 minutes, but in that time period it flooded like crazy. Yeah, it was just wild. I've never seen rain like that before. And then it just continued to be heavy rain the rest of the day, so it wasn't as bad as that. It was like off and on heavy rain. During like one of the breaks in the rain, we were able to kind of escape, and we ran to a cute coffee shop that was close by us, and I got a matcha and Jared got a latte, and that was a nice treat. But really, we just rested most of the day, and we felt kind of bad because We were excited to give Moose a day to, exercise a little bit more and stretch his legs, and we ended up mostly staying inside, but having the extra space in that house just made such a difference. We could like throw toys for him around. But yeah, we really just like watched movies and just stayed cozy all day and tried to stay out of the weather as much as possible. We did get a chance to drive around a little bit. We drove and we saw like Vanderbilt University, which I never knew was like right in downtown Nashville. I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, so we did some stuff. We did like a little driving tour, but it was just kind of like mucky out and we didn't feel like being out in the weather. So we just kind of rested, recuperated, and it did feel good to have a day where we weren't driving. And before we knew it, it was time to go to bed, time to pack up, and to wake up early again the next day to go to Charlotte, North Carolina. And we had been going back and forth with where we wanted to go in North Carolina. We wanted to go to Durham originally, but it was like an extra hour or two away from Charlotte, and so we decided to do the shorter drive. And I'm actually glad that we did that because Tennessee is a super long state. It felt like when we left that morning, we were driving through Tennessee for like 90% of our drive. It was pretty wild, and it's cool because there's so many different terrains. We drove through like the Smoky Mountains. We saw some like weird disco ball that was left over from a World Fair a while ago, but we definitely were feeling like a little bit road worn at this point, and also all of the like packing, unpacking was getting a little bit old. So we were starting to think more about the next day, and do we want to just drive all the way to Manhattan and do another really big drive? So we're contemplating that. We're listening to our audiobook, which is another great tip. If you are going on a long ride, picking out a good audiobook is always fun. We are listening to a series. We got through the whole first book of the series and we started on the second, or almost done with it, but the first one's called The Red Queen. I forget what the second one is called. But yeah, it was pretty entertaining. So we were listening to that. Eventually we got to North Carolina. We made the stop at the, big rest stop with the signs so that we could take photos of ourselves there. And then we grabbed lunch, which I'm sure you can guess where we grabbed lunch at this point. We went to Chipotle. Definitely don't need to go to Chipotle for a long time after this road trip, but we did stop there. We got that. Jared was a happy camper. And yeah, we just kept going on our trip until we got to Charlotte. And Charlotte was a really beautiful city. We were staying kind of on the outskirts of the city where it was more residential, but you could walk into the city if you wanted to. So we did a little bit of exploring. The only downside was our Airbnb, which this was the one time that we were kind of bummed with where we ended up. We got there and the place itself was really nice. It was like in an apartment complex, but there's a 4-story walk up to get to the apartment. And we had all of our stuff that we were trying to unload from the car. So we ended up actually leaving a lot of stuff in the car, which I would not recommend doing, but just because we were like so tired at that point. So we left all the like non-essential stuff that, if something was to happen to it, it wouldn't be a huge deal. We left that in the car and took only the essentials with us. And then on top of that, when we walked in, I guess the previous person who had stayed there, even though it was like a non-smoking Airbnb, had smoked in the unit. Oh my gosh, it just like reeked. Like it was so bad and so strong. And both of us were like, oh my God, this is miserable. So we opened up all the windows, contacted the host to let them know what had happened because we were like, we don't want them to think it's us and like get charged a fee or something. She was like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Like it is non-smoking, but the person who was there before you did smoke, and like the housekeeper opened the windows. She had let me know that it smelled bad in there. And that was kind of a bummer because we were like, it would have been nice if you gave us like a heads up or something. Obviously not the host's fault. It's whoever stayed there before was like super disrespectful. But it was also really interesting because as two people who don't smoke, we like didn't realize how like ingrained in fabric it can get. So like when we laid down at night to go to bed, it almost felt like a puff of smoke came out, like the mattress had absorbed the cigarette smell, and it was really unfortunate. Both of us were like, okay, I think that tomorrow we just need to go to Manhattan. We need to be done with this. We were very ready to be there, so we decided to do the big drive. We did get a really good dinner in Charlotte though. We had had so much kind of like fast food takeout and not a lot of veggies for the whole week, and so we wanted something that felt kind of fresh, and I always think of like Mediterranean food when I think of that. And so we found this place called a Yafo Kitchen, and it was really good. It was a bowl again, so it was like a rice bowl, a chicken, and different toppings you can put on it, but it was so yummy. That was probably one of my favorite meals that we had on the road. So highly recommend doing that if you are in Charlotte, and it's in like a cute little area, so it was fun to drive and go see that. The next morning, like I said, after like the cigarette smell and just like done being in so many different locations. We were like, okay, let's do this big drive. It was the same amount of time as when we did Oklahoma City to Nashville, so we were just feeling ready to do it. Jared was game to drive the whole way because he's a much faster driver than me, and so he was like putting his head down like, we're gonna get there. But if we didn't do that whole drive, we would have stopped in DC. So we knew we wanted to like have that be our halfway point, like Little Rock was on that Oklahoma City to Nashville drive. So we had DC as the half point that we knew we'd get there around lunchtime. We would stretch our legs, get lunch, and then keep going towards Manhattan. So we left super early. This was like our earliest start. I think we left at 5 something, really early. I was so tired, and when we woke up it was like thick tule fog outside. Like, I think it's because North Carolina, I believe it's a marsh, so it was such thick fog. And this was another time where we stopped at Starbucks because we were like, we're just gonna like get on the road, get moving, stop at a drive-through Starbucks, keep moving, and try and like book it towards New York. We did not get Moose a pup cup this time to try and keep him relatively calm in the back seat. And yeah, I will say the like first half of the ride until we got to Virginia, I was like pretty tired, so I didn't film that much. But yeah, we were in fog for a while, and then it kind of broke as the sun came up, and before we knew it, we were in Virginia. We hit weather on this drive too, so we didn't actually want to get out of the car for Virginia, so we just drove to the rest stop, took a quick little picture of ourselves with the sign in the background. It was raining, and then kept driving because again, we were on like such a mission to get to DC by like noon or so. And we were also really motivated to get to DC because a lot of years ago, Jared and I did an East Coast trip, and we stayed in DC for a while, and we got this restaurant like almost every day that we were there called Soul Spice, which is like a Korean barbecue bowl that is so good. It is so delicious, and we remembered it being really delicious, and it was one of those things where it's like kind of nerve-wracking to go back because it's like, what if it's not as good as you remember? But we knew we wanted to go there for lunch to kind of try it again and see if we liked it. So we got to DC. It was raining, but DC in the rain is still absolutely beautiful. Like, it's just breathtaking. We stopped at Soul Spice, got ourselves takeout, and then we drove to part of the mall. But there's a nice like walking path, so we kind of ate in the car since it was so cold and rainy. And then we got out of the car and walked around and let Moose stretch his legs. He saw all of the geese and he was very happy. We took a picture of him with the Washington Monument in the background. DC is just like a really beautiful city. I highly recommend going if you haven't before. We've really enjoyed every time that we've gone there, and this time was no exception, even though it was really crummy weather. Drove by the Pentagon. It was really cool to see. I like at one point thought we had turned the wrong way and turned into the Pentagon parking lot and was kind of freaking out that we would get in trouble, but we didn't. We were totally fine. And Soul Spice was just as good as we remembered it. It was so delicious. I'm like trying to think about our route back and like if we can somehow stop at Washington DC again so that we can get it. It's just so yummy, and everything there is gluten-free and it's wonderful, so definitely stop there. At that point, we only had like 3.5-4 hours of our drive, and so we were so ready. We were like getting so excited. It felt kind of crazy to think about how much we had done. Yeah, we went through Baltimore tunnel, which is cool because it goes underwater. Both of us like didn't say anything the whole time we were in the tunnel, and then we got out of the tunnel and we're like, it is so wild that there are tunnels that go underwater. Like, just thinking about that is crazy and also kind of freaky. Little did we know we would have to go through another tunnel that was underwater when we were coming into New York. And so we had gone through all these like worst case scenarios and like how crazy it is to go underwater like that, thinking like we wouldn't have the anxiety of doing it again. And then of course we had to, but it was totally fine, obviously. And then before we knew it, we were on the New Jersey Turnpike, and that's kind of where we stayed the whole way until we got to New York. And when I tell you like the feeling of seeing the city horizon in the distance as we were pulling into it, both of us took a deep breath. We were so tired at that point, and we were so ready to be there. And so to see it in the horizon and know that we were like going towards it, almost there, felt really great. We went in through the Holland Tunnel, which was our second underwater tunnel. So all of those wonderful thoughts that we had talked about were like definitely front of mind for both of us, and we were laughing about it as we were going through. Luckily there was no traffic in the tunnel, so we didn't have to think about it for too long. And yeah, then we emerged from the tunnel and there's a sign welcoming us to Manhattan, and we had made it. We were here and we have been here ever since. So kind of crazy to think about all of the miles we've driven, everything we've seen, everything we've done. I highly recommend this experience to anyone. It's amazing to both see how massive our country is and then also at the same time how close everything is, which I know is like a weird dichotomy to be thinking about, but it's true. It's kind of crazy that like we're in such a divided time when, you know, like crossing a state line is so easy. I don't know, it was a really wonderful time, lots of time to like reflect and think about, you know, things, and to get to interact with people from different areas and cultures and see like so much good and to see so much commonality between everything, I think was really refreshing, especially after the past few years that we've had. So if you're thinking about doing a cross-country road trip, my advice is do it. Maybe don't do it in winter time would be my only thing. Avoiding weather was like a little bit difficult. I mean, we're super excited to get to do it on the way back and to get to see different states. Like I said, it's just crazy thinking about how much we've done. So with that is the end of our road trip saga. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about it. If you have any questions, or like I said, if you're going on a road trip and you have any, like want any advice or want to know about any of the cities that we stopped in, where we stopped, that sort of thing, just let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, we will kind of pick up with more like regular normal content, not so much travel content in the coming weeks. Feel super lucky that I was able to take this time off to do a drive like that. I will say doing it in, I think we did it in 7 days, 6 nights. It was quite quick. So if you really want to explore places, I would give yourself at least 2 weeks. But yeah, it was pretty incredible. And now we can say we drove across the country, which is kind of fun. All right, you guys, I'm wishing you a really wonderful rest of your day or night or whenever you're watching this. If you're new to my channel and you enjoyed this video, it would mean so much if you subscribed. Always such a great way to show support. And if you're not new and you're watching this, then thank you so much for already supporting my channel and coming back for another video. And I will see you guys all very soon. Bye.